Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Uncharted Paths, the design lecture series by Department of Design. This is Namya and this is Archisha, and we'll be your hosts for today. We're excited to have you join us for this fascinating talk on Nayakas, and Sringara, the aesthetics of Ragmal paintings by Professor Shilpa Das. A little about the talk that is going to happen today. So, Ragamala paintings are a unique genre of Indian miniature art that combines music, poetry, and painting to capture the essence of Indian classical music. These paintings are visual interpretation of ragas and raginis designed to evoke specific moods or rasas. And you'll get to know more about the speaker through Archisha. So, our speaker for today, Professor Shilpa Das, heads interdisciplinary design studies at the National Institute of Design, Ahmedabad, an alumnus of JNU New Delhi and TIS Mumbai. She has cumulative work experience of 3 decades in the education, publishing, and voluntary sectors. She is also an accomplished author, editor, and researcher with numerous publications and awards to her credit. She is also on the editorial board of the Design Journal, US and UK. She has been involved in outreach and consultancy projects with different ministries of the Government of India at NIU. Before we begin, a quick few reminders. Please keep your microphones muted to avoid background noise. And we encourage you to keep your cameras switched on to encourage any virtual interaction. If you have any questions, kindly raise your hand and we'll collect your questions at the end of the session in the Q&A session. So without further delay, let's dive into the world of Ragmal paintings with Professor Shilpa Das. Over to you, ma'am.
Thanks, Archisha and Namya. Thanks for the very kind introduction, although I don't know whether it is fascinating because you haven't heard me yet. But thank you. So, hello everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you, Professor Deepak John Matthew, for inviting me, Seema Krishna Kumar, and IIT Hyderabad for the invitation. So, let me also now quickly share my slides. What was I supposed to do? Are you able to see it on full screen? Or is it going into that infinity?
We can see. The moment you click on the presentation, we can see the full screen.
You can see it in a full screen.
And
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's
Right?
fine.
Okay, great. So we would have to go back almost 2000 years if, as the great scholar Ananda Kumaraswamy, if you an art critic from Sri Lanka, he wanted us, if we wanted to see how our early Indian writers were able to combine both the intimate knowledge of the passions of the body and the soul with what is interesting in our tradition is that for everything we have typologies and categories and codification. Okay, so that's a very interesting aspect. Now, and before I go on to Ragmala paintings, I need to give you a brief sort of overview of the field. So we have Khandakavya or romantic lyrical love poetry that finds its acme in Kalidas, who we know as a Sanskrit poet. And the two most important works by him are the ones on the slide, Meghadutam and Ritu Samharam, which set the tone for everything that follows in this tradition. So, what Kalidas does is he evokes the romantic emotion and sensuality through his very well chosen words. So, when we read his works, we find that the colors and music of romantic love between, and it's always heterosexual love, between a man and a woman, they resonate with the world of blossoms and birds. The moods of his hero and heroine, or Nayak and Nayika, are also shared by the trees and the sky and the birds. So it's a world where messages are conveyed by clouds, and the changing seasons are understood as the changing colors of love, and where trees long for the embrace of a woman as much as a man might, where the cry of the peacock is understood as the lament of the absent lover. So those kind of conventions. And for Kalidas, a very passionate woman is not just a mere human being, a mortal, but a yakshi. the very life spirit of nature and of a tree. So, with that, I don't. Some of us may have heard about the Ashtanayikas, or 8 types of romantic heroines that the tradition mentions, and which first finds mention in the Natya Shastra by Bharat. But it was the poets who come in much after Bharat in the centuries that follow who actually enlarged this classification and gave it a body. For example, in the 16th century, and this is where this presentation begins, we have someone called Bhanudat who has written Rasamanjari, where he speaks about these 8 kinds of heroines, and he delineates the attributes of these heroines, as you can see on the slide. For instance, the Khandita is angry with her beloved, and so she scolds him. But we are going to talk about number 6 and 8 right now, and we will look into these and then go into Ragamala paintings. So, if we look at Vasaka Sajja, she who waits for her beloved with the bed prepared, then just look at this painting, observe it for a bit, and can anyone, tell me what are all the elements that you see here? In random order, anything. What is it that strikes your attention in this painting? Yes? Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, they're just sending in the chat box. So
Oh, they're sending in the chat box. Okay, wait. Then I will have to minimize the slides because when I present, I'm unable to see the chat box.
Actually, we'll read it out to you.
we'll
Yeah,
read
yeah,
it out.
please do that. Please do that. Thank you.
The bed.
The bed, somebody said the bed.
Okay,
And I think the woman combing her hair, flower, garlands.
good.
There's a lack of perspective, somebody saying flat.
Brilliant. All these things. And
There's a lot of ornamentation as well, decorated
okay,
elements. The door, the entrance,
the door, the entrance.
the
All right.
lady playing with her hair.
Correct. All right. So,
Uh,
you know what is happening here now. But before I talk about this painting, a Vasaka Sajja, or she who waits for her beloved with the bed prepared, she can be young and newly wedded, or she can be moderately experienced, or she could be mature. Similarly, this Vasaka Sajja could be one's own, meaning one's own girlfriend or wife, or she could belong to another, or she could be uncommitted like a courtesan. Okay. And in the painting on the slide, the figure that you see is of a Praudha Vasaka Sajja. She is a mature woman who is well versed in the ways of love. So, as I said, if you look at the 2 lines which are given below, these are lines from poems that are at the back of the painting. Okay, so the doe-eyed Nayika sat, having bedecked herself with ornaments, jewelry, and flowers, perfuming her curly tresses. There are beetle leaves that we cannot see because it's not that high resolution, the image, which are placed by the side of her bed. Her glistening body, adorned with gold and ketaki flowers, lit up the entire chamber. So what the painter has done is, the Naika is sitting close to the bed on a very rich floral carpet. There is a bed, as one of you mentioned. It's a little skewed, It's like it looks tilted because there's a lack of perspective, as you pointed out. There are these large bolsters on the bed with tasseled ends behind her, and every preparation for a very passionate union has been completed. There are lamps that are lit, as you can see in those cornices, those crevices at the back. There are flowers. There's a garland on the back which is very dynamic. There are garlands which are hanging on the wall. There are sprigs of flowers that have been put on the bedspread. And then we have, there's a door which is behind the bed, which is too small. but it doesn't really seem to matter, because we have this Nayika who is ready. She looks like she's all decked up, except for this last minute detail of perfuming and arranging her hair, yeah, which she's now attending to. What's the last thing one does when one is going on a date? Just before you enter that restaurant or that room where you have to meet your your beloved, you're going to attend to your hair and you're going to check yourself out in a mirror and see whether it's in place. So she's wearing this rich jewelry. She has her gaze, which is fixed firmly on that outer door that one of you mentioned. And basically what the artist has done is has removed this one wall, which is enabling us to look into this architectural interior. And even the door is not placed right, correct? Because if she's facing the door, and then if the door were truly to face her, then the viewer would not be able to see the half open door, which is important. She has left it invitingly half open because she doesn't want to seem too eager by keeping the door fully open. And at the same time, she wants to be welcoming. So, and there is this, she is an image of longing, but at the same time, of very confident expectation. Her body language, if you see with her head thrown back, it's a very confident sort of appearance. And above all, the way she's looking, the faint smile, the fixed gaze that she has, it suggests that she knows it all, and she knows. And any moment now, and some of the best paintings always are about that last second, that fraction of a moment, and we know that perhaps in the next second, the Nayak is going to enter the room through that door. All right. Just like the Sistine Chapel ceiling, where God and Adam, their fingers are millimeters away from touching. And we know that the moment their fingers touch, in the next instant, Adam is going to come to life. Right now, he's lifeless. So it is all about that anticipation and the curiosity for the viewer that you are building up. So, what happened just before this tradition came up? We have the Ajanta caves from about the 15th century till about the 15th century, and which reached its acme or pinnacle by the 11th century. And we know the style, we know what kind of figures, we know that it is inspired from, it is about Buddhist images, and it is something that is called the Western Indian style. But we'll put that aside because we are more interested in getting to our Ragamala paintings. Now, just as that Vasaka Sajja painting is a very important one, this also is a very, very important painting that we all need to recognize. So there is something, there's a poem which is called the Chaura Panchasika, which in Sanskrit translates to 50 stanzas of a thief. It was written in modern day Kashmir in the 8th century by a poet named Bilhan. Yeah. And this poem is a very passionate one where Bilhan is talking about his beloved Champavati. And you can see from the verse that is given on the slide how passionate the language or the poetry is. And more importantly, this painting was commissioned by the Hindu and Muslim aristocracy of the 16th century, who commissioned many such texts, and but this one is the Chaura Panchasika. It is this particular is a folio which is one from the series. Some of these original folios we have in the Calico Museum in Ahmedabad, in the NC Mehta Gallery in Ahmedabad as well. And we see here this woman, Champavati, who is standing next to a lotus pond, right? But what is interesting about this painting is that for the first time, we have some elements which are synthesized and blended together. So you have things like the checkered bedspread on the bed, which is a very typical Jain motif. You see it in Jain miniatures, this kind of checked pattern. even the pattern on the bolster, as well as her skirt, which is the ajrak sort of skirt that you find in Gujarat and Rajasthan. And then what is important here again is that the architecture that you see behind Champavati is again the fourth wall has been removed. And this is an example of Sultanate architecture which predates the Mughal. Okay, so this is a very good blend of Jain. And in the Jain paintings, Jain miniatures, typically the torsos are like the Egyptian ones. I'm sure you're familiar with that. With the profile is three-fourths, the eyes, you can see very extended eyes on the side, and so on. So all of these are typical to the time. And so this Chaurasika Panchasika marks a turning point in Indian painting, and its gentle eroticism sets the tone for all the paintings that follow. Yeah, and also because you have Sanskrit, which used to be the text in earlier paintings in the verses, which is now giving way to the more intimate atmosphere of regional or vernacular literatures in Hindi, Bengali, and other provincial languages. So the Chaura Panchasika basically inspired a major series of paintings, which is called the CPS group, that became the benchmark for pre-Mughal art. And you find also that these paintings that I'm going to show you are from mostly Rajasthan, in all likelihood Mewar, which is very different from the Jain miniatures that precede this particular, the Chaura Panchasika painting, which had a certain spirituality, a certain piety. But the ones we see now are all about love, romance, the Sringara rasa, and they are very, very different. So we have this poet called Keshav Das, who is a very typical Riti poet, as they are called. And his work, the Rasika Priya, is like an encyclopedia. It's what is called a Lakshana Granth. It's an encyclopedia of different kinds of Nayaks and Nayikas, their moods, their meetings, the messengers who pass messages between them. And as I said, it is a Lakshana Granth in Brij Bhasha. So, works like this, what they did was that they set into motion a very complex typology. Then, after that, you have a series of ideal lovers and their mental states, which are expressed in the paintings. And they had two things: the heroine's intense longing for her beloved who is absent, and then the beloved comes and the joy of their meeting. Yeah. So from now onwards, from the Rasika Priya onwards, a new style of feminine beauty permeates literature and art, according to which women are perceived as very passionate lovers who are very bold, who are brave, who will brave all natural sort of dangers in their paths in order to meet their beloved. And also, interestingly, these very erotic, very romantic paintings are given a new outlet through bhakti, or the Vaishnavite devotional religion, which was dominant at the time, in which the intensity of love between these two, between the Nayak and the Nayika, become a metaphor for the desire between Krishna and Radha, or any gopis. So, this is another interesting Naika that after the Vasaka Sajja, the Abhisarika, that I would like all of us to be acquainted with, and has a very typical iconography. So, what do you notice about this heroine? Anybody? And Seema, you could read out from the chat box, please. What are the elements in
Yeah.
this painting?
Um, so we can see elements of snakes. There is rain.
Go on.
She's not afraid of the snake.
Right. Very similar to the painting on my title slide.
Yeah.
And now I'll go to the one we were at. Yes. So what is the time of the day?
Probably evening, night.
Okay. And what else do you see?
She's strolling even in the rain and with the snake. She's not scared of the snakes.
Yeah, thank you. So, of all, so basically, in the Sanskrit tradition, the romantic heroine usually are of two types, or love is of two types. Either they will show love in union or love in separation. Yeah. This one is a painting about love in longing, the Abhisarika Nayika. So Keshav Das talks about three kinds of Abhisarikas. He says there is the Prema Abhisarika, who is very sure of her love and she sets out to meet her beloved. Okay. There is the Garva Sarika, who is also setting out to meet her beloved, but she is very self assured and of her beauty, and she's confident that she can draw her beloved towards her. And then there is the Kama Bhisarika, who is again very driven by her love and sets out in the middle of the night, irrespective of the dangers in her path. And then there is the Krishna Bhisarika, who sets out on this love mission, so to speak, at night, and the Shukla Bhisarika, who goes out during the day. Okay. And the Abhisarika is so driven by her relentless love and her overwhelming desire to meet her beloved that she will not be stopped by anything, none of the dangers in her path. You can see that it's a dark night, there is no moon, there's a raging storm, it's raining, there are dark clouds, ominous clouds which are hovering above. Those brown serpentine lines are lightning, and neither the snakes nor the goblins or the ghost in the title slide that you saw, which her path is full of them, but her commitment is unshakable. Her mind is made up. Her determination is adamantine. And nothing is going to stop her. No hazard will deter her. No danger will frighten her. And no difficulty will weaken her desire to go and meet her beloved. Another thing to remember is that thunder is always shown to be her enemy, the Nayika's enemy, and lightning, Thunder's wife or consort, is her friend. So lightning will try to light her path so that she can see where she is walking. Yeah, and the one important thing that we see here is, but I'll come to that. Let us see in the next slide. There's something common about the Nayika, okay, about the Abhisarika. So she's full of passion in her art. The difference in the painting to the left is that there is a Sakhi here, okay, who is probably in all likelihood telling her not to go. It could be a Sakhi or a friend, it could be her sister in law, she could be a married woman, and you can see her beloved depicted as Krishna to make this tryst, this meeting more legitimate and to validate her going to meet him. So, this one, the friend seems to be telling her, look, are you sure you know what you are doing? You putting yourself at risk in this dark night. You're putting your marriage at risk. But anyway, she also, like the Abhisarika in the previous slide, is determined. And the one thing that we see about both these Abhisarikas is the way they are holding on to their skirts. It's hitched up. Why would it be hitched up? Because it's raining. To avoid it getting muddy and soiled in the water, obviously, that is on the ground, or the mud that is on the ground. So she's like one possessed and she's not going to be held back. So all these elements are what you see very artfully put by the artist to depict the Abhisarika figure. So, with that, we'll come to the Ragamala paintings, and these are perhaps the best union of literature or poetry, of painting, and of music. So, the Ragamalas, practically every school of painting in India at the time, and even in the Pahadi schools in the north, in Rajasthan, in the south at Bijapur, these paintings reach their sensuous climax. They are all about romance, they are all about joy. And we are going to look at, I will just show you 4 or 5 types because obviously we can't look at the whole gamut. But before we come to the actual images, just 3 slides where I'll talk a little bit about Ragmala paintings and introduce you. So, the Ragamala paintings, besides the visual, they are talking about the spirit and beauty of music, the art of Swara Lay, as it is called. And in these Rag or Ragini paintings, what the artist is trying to do is to capture the spirit of a raga by giving a human embodiment, whether male or female, by anthropomorphizing them, as it is called, and giving them a human association, associating certain colors, certain moods, so that you experience the rasa of that painting. And this is a very idyllic kind of situation, a very ideal sort of scenario, which transports us as if to a world of romantic, enchanting experiences, which as a viewer we can identify with. And therefore, it is as if we feel that this is our imagination that has come into the painting, which in Indian aesthetics is called tanmayata, empathy. You empathize with the character in the image so that you and the character become one. So this is also called sadharikaran. You universalize or generalize that particular emotion. The other thing to remember is that in these paintings, ragas and raginis are not just mere structural things of tones and tunes, or swaras, but they are, as I said earlier, taken as living, as having that value. And one thing that we need to remember is that in Indian aesthetics, whether it is in the plastic arts, in the sculptural tradition, or in painting, the artists or the sculptors had in mind what are called dhyan murtis, or the image of that particular figure, or dhyana mantras. So, suppose in the sculptural tradition, somebody has to carve out or sculpt an image of Ganesh or Lakshmi. They're not just going to put chisel to stone and start off. What they will do is it's a long uh, process of many steps. They will they'll take a bath, wear white clothes, and in Buddhism also you find this. They will sit facing east in a meditate in Padmasana, and they'll close their eyes and they will try to visualize that figure in their mind's eye, and see every attribute. How will they visualize every attribute? Because there are things called dhyana mantras, which they know. So they will say Shankha Chakra Padaste Mahalakshmi Namastuta, which means in one hand there is a lotus, in another there is a shank or a conch, and so on. And then when they open their eyes, they have already actually visualized. So the act of creation is done. Now they only have to execute. So the dhyana mantras help these artists to give a human attribute to the ragas. They also show some kind of each raga or ragini is standardized in some way, or there is a natural environment or setting in which you will find them, which is very easily identifiable once you familiarize yourself with the raga chitra of that particular raga or ragini. Why and how? Because that raga or ragini may be in a particular pose, or there are some easily recognizable props, or the setting itself is very typical. Again, most of these, as I said earlier, Sringara is dominant, It is about love in union or separation from your beloved. And again, so there are six main ragas: Bhairav, Kaushik, Hindol, Deepak, Shri, and Megh. And each of these male ragas has five or six wives or raginis. There is also an elaborate system of ragaputras and ragaputris. I'm not going into all those details. So, what Ragamala painting does is that it gives an abstract concept like music a concrete form. The Nirvikalpa becomes Savikalpa. Also, each melody, they say, has two forms. Each raga has two forms. There is a sound form that we can hear when a raga is, and suppose an artist is rendering the rag, will be able to hear the sound form or playing the rag. We listen to the instrument and how the raga plays out. But there is also a spiritual form that we feel, that is intangible, that is invisible, but which is as much a, an aspect of the raga in terms of the ripples that it generates. Okay. The other thing to remember is that many objects or props are placed in these paintings, which are typical. They set the tone and the mood, but also they are very symbolic. And conventions of the time were such that they were known to the viewers. They knew that if there are two earthenware jars, they mean this. If there are two buzzing bees, it means this. Rain, lighting, everything had a um, certain symbolism that was attached to it. So, again, the last thing before we start looking at the images is that in Ragamalas, for example, one author one poet who scribbled something behind a certain folio, said that sur or sound is of two types. There is anahat and there is ahat. So, ahat means the sound that is produced when you strike two things against each other. So, if I clap my hands like this, I'm striking my two hands, that is ahat sound. But anahat sound, and I would like all of you to do this for just 20 seconds. Please close your eyes and then with your index fingers, just close your ears and listen. Can anyone tell me what happened when you closed your eyes and your ears? Did you hear anything?
There was like a like there's a sound which is like
Wonderful. That's great. Because there is this sound exists inside us as well. And anahat means that sound that has no cause. So that is the difference between anahat and ahat sound. And many of you may be trained in Indian classical, Hindustani or Carnatic, and you know that we have these seven notes, and there are, and Saregama Padani, which have a certain the association with a certain bird or an animal, and also there is a certain color that is associated with these rags. So the sages who penned down, I mean, not literally penning down, but who put down the rules of classical music in the subcontinent, they lived in close proximity with nature and they were more sensitive to sound and vision. So they observed the sounds of certain birds and animals and they derived these notes, this alphabet of music, from the sounds that they heard in nature. Okay. And yeah, and this therefore then they developed this entire system of notes and so So with that
Ma'am,
now, yeah,
can we interrupt you for a second?
sure.
There must be a pop-up box on your screen that shows stop sharing and hide, right? Can
Yeah,
you click on hide?
okay, yeah, great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. So now we come to the best part of this presentation. We'll look at about five Raginis and Ragas, and we will learn to identify them. And I'm sure once we are done, these will become unforgettable and it will be indelible in your minds, so that every time you see a similar one, you will be able to identify that this is this Raga or this is this Ragini. So we begin with Ragini Todi, and as you can see, there are three different paintings that I have put on the slide. You can see the verse at the bottom from the poem, which is describing Todi. So, Todi is the second wife of Rag Hindol, and she's among the most identifiable of Ragmalas. She's represented as a young and a beautiful young girl, passionately in love, but uh, she's separated from her beloved, and so maybe he's jilted her or dumped her, as you might say today, and she's wandering about in the forest. So now she's become a recluse. She wants to avoid human company. So she goes about in the forests and she plays on a very small stringed instrument or the veena. And with this sad music that she makes, she typically attracts deer and antelopes and a black buck, as you can see in two of these paintings. There are texts that talk about how she has a beautiful face like a lotus or like a female deer, or how she's as charming as a garland of lotuses, and so on. And typically, she's desperate actually to divert her mind, to get over that relationship. So, as you can see, the amount of detail in these three paintings is a little different. The first one, you only have the deer. In the third one, there are these companions or friends or maids or whoever who are also with her, and a monkey and a peacock instead of the typical deer. But the second one, as you can see, with this, the artist seems to be saying that you can eliminate much of the detail. You need not bring in the mountain or the forest or the lotus lake, and he places the maiden, this girl, all by herself under a lone tree, willow like tree, and the tree itself is bent over her, you know hang, as if in loving sympathy. And if you have read the play Shakuntala, Abhigyana Shakuntalam by Kalidas, it is said that when Shakuntala leaves the ashram of her father, eh, nature weeps, when she's leaving them. And the trees bend over as if to hug her or to comfort her. And this is exactly what you see. So, using the tree, the artist is trying to emphasize her sad, forlorn, bereft state. And the rendering is touching because it is so simply done. And the parallels that are drawn by the artist between the sad branches of this sparse tree and the Ragini's mental state, between the charming eyes, I'm sorry for the resolution of the image, between the eyes of the antelope and the eyes of this Ragini, right? And the colors also that are used, it's a very sparse kind of color palette. The painter feels no additional information is required. The costume, if you notice, the first one, even in the second one, actually, it's a Peshwas, because this is the time when it's the time of the Mughals. And they wore this salwar below the long, thin skirt, which is usually seen through the parting of the panels, and so on and so forth. There's a dupatta that is across the body in front, and all of that. So when you look at these,
Ma'am, I think Deepak sir has raised his hand.
okay, because I can't see any of you. I can only see the slides.
Yeah, yeah, I'll just let
Yeah.
you. So you wanted to.
Just ask Deepak,
Deepak, sir?
or it may be accidental also.
Probably accidental.
All right.
You can
Okay.
continue.
It was an accident.
Sure.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
okay, a good accident because it gave me a pause and a break. So this is also Ragini Todi, and you can see this is from the south, from the Deccan. The one on the right is in the V&A in London. It's a beautiful painting if you see it firsthand, and the text that is inscribed at the back of this painting says this, that that Ragini Todi is like a deer that is caught in a hunter's net, and she's struggling to free herself. But the more she struggles and tries to free herself, the more entangled she gets, which means that she's unable really to get rid of this relationship or the beloved that she's lost, and so on. Yeah. So that was Ragini Todi. This is Ragini Bhairavi. And Ragini Bhairavi is shown to be this very austere woman, a devotee of Shiva, because you can see that the shrine has a shriveling. And she's always visualized as very austere. The mood associated with this Ragini is one of meditation, is one of devotion. She's usually shown to be seated, offering worship to the Shivlingam by the side of a water body. You can see in both the paintings at in the bottom register, there are these lotuses and waterfowl or swans. She's shown to be playing on the manjira or cymbals as she sits there. And the time of day is usually the morning. Now, when you see the left one, I hope that some of you are able to recall that the figure of the woman is like one of the figures that I showed you in an earlier slide. Can anyone recall which one? The clue is the checked skirt. The Chora Panchasika painting by Bilhan, correct? Again, so this is a Jain, this particular Bhairavi, as you can see, is from 1550 and is in the style of the Jain miniatures, whereas the one on the right probably had some Persian influence because in Akbar's court, there were Persian artists as there were Jain artists as well in his karkhanas. And so the color palette also changes to cool colors and the kind of colors that you find with Persian art. Yeah. And again, the way she's sitting, there is a narrow band of sky at the top. It is and I'm sure some of you, perhaps Deepak and I hope we are not the only ones who can recall that in some earlier cinema, such as, say, Satyam Shivam Sundaram by Raj Kapoor, or an earlier Devanand film called Jogan from the 1950s or 60s, this kind of iconography and image is typically found. So in Satyam Shivam Sundaram, the title song has Zinat Aman, who was the actor, going to this temple and worshipping the lingam and all of that. Yeah. So this is very typically Bhairavi. And you can see in these two Bhairavis that in the first one, the figure of the lingam is replaced by Nandi the bull, who is Shiva's mount. And the second one, very clearly from the color palette, you know that this has been rendered by Persian artists completely in Akbar's court. So these are some other examples. In the one on the right, you can see in the central register that it is not the Shivling but Shiva Panchanan, or the five faces of Shiva that you can see. So with that, we come to one male raga, which is Deepak. And when, it is said that when the Nayika bashfully returned, all she had to show to her Sakhis was this burn on her hand, and her Sakhis were satisfied, meaning that they know she met her beloved and so on. So, what is Deepak Rag? I think some of you may have heard the story of Mia Tansen, who was one of the 9 gems in Akbar's court. And the apocryphal story goes that the other courtiers were jealous of Tansen because Akbar favored him, and they conspired. They said, "Let us instigate the emperor to ask Tansen to render the Deepak Rag, because whoever sings Rag Deepak, their body heat goes up. They will have fever or brain fever, and they can also die. And because Tansen is an accomplished singer, it would definitely have happened. And as the story goes, in some story they say that Tansen after that sang Malhar or Miyaki Malhar, or he meets these two girls called Tanariri in Gujarat who sing Rag Malhar, and the rain comes down and his fever goes away, and he then recovers. So Deepak Rag, the iconography always, it's very identifiable. You will have two lovers on a terrace, as you can see, an aristocratic setting. They are sitting on the terrace, but you can see a haveli, and there are lots and lots of lamps all around them. Yeah, the flames and the light is what is typical to these paintings. And you can sometimes, they will show a flame on the forehead of the Nayak or the Raga. And typically, they have these flames coming out of their head and shoulders, representing their passion. And very softly, but not with excessive sort of emotion, he holds his beloved close to him, and she sometimes shyly turns her face away from him, and she covers her chest with her dupatta. That is a very typical thing. In the background, you will often see a bed and cushions. Here it is not there, but in some other Deepak renderings, you will find a bed, which shows the promise of love. What is going to this is going to lead to, and there will be platters and boxes and pan and sweets and whatever around them. The lovers are lost in themselves, their togetherness, and that is all that seems to matter. So this is a very typical Bundi style. The right one, even the left one, they are both from Bundi Kota, and you can see that from the figures. But this is also Rag Deepak. Again, Rag Deepak. Then we have Ragini Meghmalar, and this is actually the time for, because this is the monsoon or the rainy season. The interesting thing about Meghmalar is whoever sang it, if it was Guru Nanak, the first Sikh Guru, then it is called Nanak Ki Malhar. When Mirabai sang it, it is called Mira Ki Malhar. When Tansen sings, it is called Mia Ki Malhar, and that is how it goes. So the rainy season has very strong romantic associations, because this is the time for the pleasures of love as well as the pathos of longing. The weather is such that if you are separated from your beloved, it'll make you even more depressed. Dark clouds, the sound of rain is something you can typically feel. The cry of the peacock, the aroma of freshly soaked earth, which sends ripples of excitement through the hearts of the lovers. And this is a time to celebrate, to recreate the sounds of the season with drums and cymbals. They are shown to be dancing because they are very happy. Usually it is Krishna and gopis. Sometimes it can be Kamdev as well. And that is what it is typically sort of associated with. So in the one right hand top corner, you see the it is shown to be Krishna, and they are so happy because the monsoon has arrived and it is just about to rain. You can see the lightning in the sky, that Krishna blows his conch to announce as if the arrival of the rainy season. Yeah. So some more representations. And then the final three Raga Raginis that I'll show you. This is Rag Kedar. Again, just as Bhairavi was very austere as a woman, you have Kedar, a young man who is shown to be very austere. He's sitting outside this shrine. We do not know whether which god or goddess is in the shrine, but because his body is typically smeared with ashes, and because of the tiger bark, because Shiva is sometimes shown to sit on the bark of a deer or a tiger, we think, we can very safely sort of guess that this is a shrine of Shiva. And Kedar, as you know, is another name for Shiva. So Kedar is this young man with a dark complexion, handsome, who is pained by separation from his beloved. And because he is now separated from her, she's probably married away to some other man. He has renounced the world and smeared ashes all over his body. In the Calico Museum in Ahmedabad, we have a beautiful one by Nansukh of Guler, in which Kedar is shown to be this old man. So, he's passed all his life pining for her, but in austerity. Yeah. And usually there will be some people sitting in front of him because he is now considered as wise. And so people come to seek his wisdom and his knowledge and so on. Now, this one and the next one are my two favorites, and these are going to be the last two today. Madhu Madhavi. So, Madhu Madhavi, as you can see from the painting, is again all about that last second, that fraction of a second before something else happens in the painting, as in the Vasaka Sajja painting. Yeah. So, what do we see here? Again, there are dark and ominous clouds, streaks of lightning in the air. The darkness apparently is not because it is late evening or night, but because clouds have gathered. There's a sense of longing in the air. And under this dark, cloud laden sky, lit by flashes of lightning, we see a young woman, again, possibly aristocratic because she's moving towards an aristocratic haveli or an interior, a chamber, which is very ornately decorated. And so, this young woman, she's sheltering herself with her sari, from possibly the dust or the wind or the first or whatever. And as she's just about to step inside this haveli, she looks back over her shoulder at the approaching storm. One hand holds up this delicately patterned, almost transparent dupatta, and her eyes are gazing upwards. So there seems to be a certain hesitation in her gait as well. On the one hand, she wants to be indoors and protected from the storm, but on the other, the clouds and the lightning create in her this desire to be with her beloved, or she is worrying about him and his safety. And so, just as the rain is about to descend or has descended, she is rushing inside. Yeah. And she looks back at that last moment to turn and see whether it started raining, really. And usually, not in this one, but in some others, you can see a bed again inside that in that interior, which again expresses her longing, the rising tide of desire, and the artist usually catches this mood to perfection. So, in these two renderings, there is a Sakhi or a maid who is asking her mistress to come in before she gets drenched in the rain. In the other one, there's an old lady, perhaps a mother in law or an older maid. And you can see in this one on the right that her husband is already inside and is preparing the bed for the afternoon. And there is a peacock because the peacock is also symbolic of the lover, as I mentioned earlier in these paintings and in the poetry that accompanies it. And this again is one of my favorites, Ragini Dhanashri, the last one I talk about. And Dhanashri is all about being absorbed in thoughts of her absent beloved. Yeah. So, what is the iconography? That she's holding this lovely drawing board, she's sketching or drawing or painting his picture. This is obviously much before photography came around. And she's trying to draw, and then she looks at that sketch in order to remember her beloved. Now, who is this Virahini figure? the Virahini figure, we first come across this figure in Kalidas's poetry. So this is a Nayika who is separated from her lover. She is usually uh, expressed as a very virtuous, lovelorn woman who lives in a home that is very Spartan and frugal. She's put everything away because her beloved is not there. She's not interested in combing her hair. She's not interested in dressing up or wearing her ornaments. And usually she's shown with her head resting in her hands, her head bent down, and painting her beloved, talking to either a Sakhi or a Sarika bird, or singing a song that contains his name, and she's counting the days of her separation. So, just as you might put crosses on a calendar today, she puts flowers on the threshold. So, each flower represents a day and tells her how many days has it been since, or months, or weeks since she met her beloved. There's a certain dignity in her sorrow. There is a certain grace also there. And Meghadutam is the epitome of the Virahini. Okay. So this Ragini Dhanashri is also that, a Nayika overcome by the pangs of separation. And interestingly, what are the details that you see here? Which is, it is similar to some of the paintings we have seen because they are all around the same centuries. The painting is divided into different horizontal registers, and the Nayika is in the middle register, somewhere on a terrace or a veranda like space, and she's sketching or painting. But interestingly, here we see that even her absent beloved or husband is as eager to meet her as she is eager to meet him, and he can't wait. So he does not. He's probably, because the shield indicates that he is gone. He was gone for a long time, fighting a battle or a war, and he's returning. And he also just doesn't want to get off from the horse and run upstairs. He just takes the horse and goes up, and the groom of the horse is leading him upwards. Right. So this throws a little kind of surprise to us, and also indicates to us the mood of the Nayak. So again, in the chamber, there will be a bed that is shown, as you can see in the one on the left, very prominently, and which indicates the longing that is in her mind. But sometimes in these paintings, and it's not on these two, but you also see a second bed on this terrace where the Nayika is, which probably tells the viewer that perhaps she lay here night after night, staring at the sky and the stars, and longing and pining for her beloved, in the manner of the Virahini paintings. Usually, there is a certain convention. The body, the posture, the way the head is bent, the view, the Naika is always shown to be seated. The painting is held at about 60 degrees at a distance of 10 to 12 inches from her eyes. The head is tilted downwards so that it becomes parallel as if to the painting, and the border of the painting is always prominently in sight. Okay, the setting is very intimate. Usually there will be just one person with her, if at all, but usually in many of these Dhanashri paintings she is alone because she seems to be wanting her privacy. So some more renderings of this. Always a bed in the background. And yeah, that's that. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.